Alright everyone, we are pretty much done with this app, but in this video we are quickly just going to go and support the app on iPad. We're going to support the app in light and dark mode, and then we're going to add some support for portrait and landscape. As you're going to see, there's actually not going to be too much that we have to do to support these things because of the way we've already built out our app. In all of our screens we have used a UI that can adapt for portrait and horizontal. We have used colors that adapt for light and dark mode. And really what we're doing in this video is kind of confirming that that's all working correctly and then making the necessary adjustments. All right, guys, welcome back. I think this will be the final video in the series. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. Our app is pretty much done. We did most of the logic. We can click through and go to all of our locations. But I want this app to also be supported on the iPad, and we haven't done any iPad stuff yet. So let's check it out and see how it looks on an iPad. So at the top here, I'm going to change the deployment to an iPad Pro. We'll go 12.9 inch, and let's build to the iPad simulator just to check it out quickly. Alright, so the app is launching on the iPad here. I hope you guys can't hear the fan that much because the iPad makes my fan go crazy on my computer. Alright, so this doesn't look so bad. We have the list here is kind of full screen. It's going all the way to the edges. And same with this bottom bar here. It's going all the way to the left and the right. And I think that that's okay if we wanted to leave it. But really when you're working on an iPad, a lot of your content, you kind of don't want it to be the full width of the iPad. You want it to be like kind of in the center of the iPad. So let's make a maximum width here so that this top section and this bottom section aren't going all the way to the edges of the screen. All right, so let's do that. And what we're going to do, we're going to jump into the locations view, and we're not even going to check for the iPad right now. We're just going to make a maximum width, because we know these iPads are obviously much bigger than the iPhone. So if the maximum width, let's say, is maybe 400 or 500 pixels, we know that the iPhone is smaller than that. So this maximum width would never affect the iPhone. But on the iPad, these iPads can get pretty wide. So let's create a maximum width for this list here. So at the top of my locations view, I'm going to do a let max width. Let's do max width for iPad, just to be explicit so we can remember this in our code. And let's make it of type CG float, and let's make it maybe 700 pixels wide. All right, so the first thing is that header section at the top here. And so after the padding, let's just very simply add a .max width. Let's add a frame with a max width, and let's give it the max width for iPad. So 700 pixels. If we build that one more time quickly, we should see that update. We should see that update now to a maximum of 700 pixels. So this would be about 700 pixels. Looks a little bit better. Let's also get this bottom section kind of doing the same thing. The bottom section is going to be a little bit tricky because we have this transitions popping in from the left to the right. So firstly, let's go down to these location preview view. So locations preview stack. We have our location preview here. So after we add the padding, we want to actually add the .frame with a max width of infinity, of max width for iPad. So if I click resume now, we should see it update for this locations preview view. So the width is now perfect, but we're going to have one problem, and it's that when we click the next button, the actual animation is going to look a little clunky now. So if I click it, while I'm clicked on the iPad, I'm going to go up to the debug menu and click slow animations. So now let's click the next button, and very slowly it's going to animate to the left. We can see that it goes to the left and then stops right here and then pops off the screen. Kind of the same thing when it just pops onto the right of the screen and then pops off the left here, right? So again, look at the right edge here on the screen. When I click this next button, it's not going to pull in from the right edge, but it's rather popping in. So like, look. It just pops in and then goes. And same thing here, it goes and then just pops off the screen. It's not going all the way to the edge of the device. And you're probably wondering why that's happening. So if I add a .background onto this frame here, let's do color .green, and we build and run to the iPad. I'll take the slow animations off for a second. We can see that the green section for this preview is actually limiting right here. So when we do these transitions in our code, right, so the transition is moving from the trailing or the leading edge of the object. So the object right before this transition is this. And obviously that's this green section that we can now see is right here. So the problem is that the transition is happening not from the edge of the screen, but from the edge of the object that it's on. So the edge is right here, and that's why the transition is not going all the way off the screen. So really what we want to do is make the edge of the object back to the edge of the screen. So even though we have this maximum width here for this preview, we're going to add another frame after this. So we're going to add one more dot frame, and we'll do a max width of infinity here. So I'm going to make, let's add a background here to color to orange just for 1 second. So let's build and run this one more time. So now we have a frame for our max width for iPad, and that's going to be orange. All right, so now we can see that we have the orange section, which is where our actual content is. That's the orange section here. But we're adding this extra maximum width frame, which we're making it green. And we can see that that new maximum width is going all the way to the edges of the screen. So now when we do this transition, it's actually going to transition based on this frame and not this frame. So now our transition will come in from the green section, which is actually the edge of our app here. So now if we do this, it'll look a little bit better. And I'll put it back into slow animation again, just so that we can see when I click it, it's actually pulling in from the edges of the screen now. It's not popping in and popping off on the sides. And that's a much better UI. All right, so I'm going to delete our color green. I'm going to delete our color orange. And let's build it one more time. I think we're looking pretty good on the iPad here. Let's turn off slow animations again. All right, so we have our animations looking pretty good. And let's see, this is all working good. And now we have one more screen in our app, the Learn More. So we pop that up here, and let's see. This is actually not looking too bad. I thought we were going to have more work to do. This is looking good. So the sheet looks a little different on the iPad, but generally I think we are supporting iPad pretty well here with really not that much code to change it for the iPad. One thing I did notice is that I think these images are actually being extended much bigger than the edge of this frame here. So let's quickly take a look at the location detail view. And we go to the image section. And remember, we made each of these images the frame of the actual device. So UI screen.main.bounds.width. So when we look at this sheet popping up on an iPad, you know, the width of the screen is all the way to the edges of the screen, and obviously the sheet on the iPad is not the edges of the screen. So we kind of don't want to make these images this big when we're on the iPad. So let's add a very simple ternary operator here. We'll say, we're going to check here if we're on the iPad. So we'll say UI device dot current, so the current device dot, and we're going to say the user facing idiom. So the style of the interface that is on the current device. And we're going to check if it is equal to dot, and then there should be a couple options here, but we're going to look for the pad. So if it's an interface designed for the iPad, and we'll add a question mark. So if it is on the iPad, we're not going to set a width. So we'll just put it as nil. And we'll say otherwise, if it's not the iPad, so if it's the iPhone, we're going to use the UI screen.main.bounds.width. So we build it, run it one more time. Kind of the same code, except now the frame of these images shouldn't be the full screen of the device. So if we look, these images should look a little bit better now on our iPad. I think they do. These images are a little more zoomed out because they're not extending to the full width of the screen. I think that looks great. While we're here, let's also turn the app into landscape mode and check it out for the iPad, which I think is also looking pretty good. This is looking good. I don't think we need to do anything to support landscape on the iPad here. Even the sheets are looking good. So I think that's actually just all we're going to do for the iPad support. Awesome. And one thing that I was going to go over in this video is supporting dark mode for this app. And you guys probably already noticed, which I'm just realizing, but my iPad here is already in dark mode. And that's why the map looks a little bit different. So if you want to change the light dark mode on any of these simulators, you can always just go to the settings on the actual simulator and then click on the developer tab, and you can switch it from light mode to dark mode. So here I'll go back into light mode, and our app updates automatically. But what I wanted to cover was the dark mode for iPad. So again, I'm going to switch it back into dark mode, but the caveat is that we already saw it in dark mode and it actually looks pretty good. So the reason this looks good, and I want to point it out here, is that all of our text in this app, we're using the primary and secondary colors. So if we go into like our location detail view and we look at maybe some of these texts here, let's go to the title section here. So this title section is this section here where we have the Louvre Museum followed by Paris. And the Louvre Museum, it's white, but you'll notice that on this title here, we didn't give it a color. And that's because if we don't give it a foreground color by default, it's going to be the .foreground color of primary. And as I discussed in the SwiftUI bootcamp, these primary colors and these secondary colors adapt automatically for light and dark mode. So that's why when we're in dark mode, this text is white, but when we're in light mode, this text is black. It's also why this foreground color for the Paris word here is secondary, which is this nice gray. And when we go to light mode, it's still a gray, but it's a slightly different gray that looks better on light mode. So the reason we didn't have to do much color updating to support light and dark mode is because we used adaptive colors out of the box. Similarly, if we look at like this preview view here, we used the background of that is actually ultra thin material. So that's the background of this preview view, and that thin material, all of those materials are automatically adaptable for light and dark mode, and that's why we love using them. They just look great and they adapt, and I think it's just a win-win overall to use those materials. All right, so iPad is looking good, and we can support the iPad in landscape and in portrait mode, and both are looking really, really good. So I'm going to close out of the iPad simulator to get the fan to stop going crazy on my computer. And let's open back up an iPhone 13. Let's build and run this to an iPhone 13. All right, so I got our iPhone up here, and I'm back in light mode on my iPhone. But one thing I did notice is that when we rotate the iPhone, the UI updates, which is awesome, because we actually didn't have to do anything to rotate it and support the landscape mode on the iPhone. But the downside, of course, is that this UI doesn't look very good for this app. So if I click on this arrow, we can see that the list kind of doesn't really show up because this is taking up a lot of the space. And when I try to display a sheet, that looks super weird. So really, I don't think this UI should be supported on the iPhone in landscape mode. So we're going to turn that off now. Let's go into our code. We're going to go to the navigator up here, click on this blue bar, go to the general tab, and then here we have all of our supported devices here. So we can see nothing is checked, and that's because we're clicked on iPhone and iPad. So this is kind of like a unstated thing when you're learning Xcode, but if you click on both of these versus if you click on one of these items, the device orientation is actually going to change. So it's weird. If we click on just the iPad, we can see that the iPad is actually supported for portrait, upside down, landscape, and landscape left and landscape right. That's actually fine. I'm fine with that. But let's also switch to the iPhone here. For our purposes, we only want the iPhone to be available in portrait mode. So we're going to check just iPhone and we're going to check just portrait. And then we're going to switch it back to iPhone and iPad. So this way, when we're on just the iPad, we can support all of these. When we're on just the iPhone, we can do just portrait. And then we obviously want to deploy to both of those devices. So it's a little weird that we have to do those one at a time. There's no like manual telling you to do that, but now you guys know. And so now the iPhone should be portrait only based on that. All right, so again, let's build this to our iPhone 13. build it one more time, and my iPhone 13 is in landscape mode. So when this launches, it should be in portrait mode. But of course, it didn't work. And you're probably scratching your head. I was scratching my head too. This should be enough to get this to work, but for some reason it does not. And I think it might be an Xcode 13 bug, maybe. But basically, we got to look at the info.plist for our app. And that used to be a separate file in the navigator, but it's not there anymore. And now it's in our info tab. So if you look at the info tab, this is our plist here, which is basically just a bunch of settings in another file. Explicitly, we can see the supported interface orientations for the iPad. And these are updating when we click on those check marks that we just had. So this should be in line with those check marks, which it looks like it is for the iPad. But when I look for the ones for the iPhone here, for some reason, the landscape left and landscape right did not go away. And I don't really know why they didn't. But what we're going to do is basically just remove this landscape from the supported orientations for the iPhone. So here, this landscape left, let's just press the minus sign, and the landscape right, let's just press the minus sign. Super easy. Let's build it one more time, and now if we launch it on this horizontal, if we launch it at landscape mode, we can see that the app is still going to be in portrait mode, which is exactly what we wanted. All right, so now we are supporting landscape and portrait on the iPad, but only portrait on the iPhone, and it's looking good. Last thing we're going to do to wrap up this video is actually add a launch screen. So if I close the app and then reopen it, all right, and if I launch this app, before we actually get into the app, it's going to be a plain white screen. So plain white screen, and then we go into the app. And that plain white screen is the launch screen, and we're going to customize it here. And in this app, we're going to do it using the info.plist, which is kind of like the SwiftUI way to do it. All right, so very simply, we already have a launch screen here. And in this launch screen, we're going to click the little plus, and we're going to let's add an image name. So now we need to give this an image name. So image name, we're going to click over here. And now what image do we want to use on our launch screen? So if we go to the assets folder, I already added an image in our logos. That's called logo-launch. Looks like this, and that's what we're going to use. So let's go back. And for our launch screen, let's just make the name logo-launch. All right, and then also we're going to click another on here. We're going to click plus. We're going to add a background color. And the background color is going to be our accent color. Again, I'm spelling this accent color exactly how it is in our assets folder. So accent color here matches up exactly, and it's going to be that red. So that's right here. And lastly, I want to click on this, and we'll do the image respects safe area insets, and we'll just change this to yes. Then we can change it over here to yes. So the image is just going to be within the safe area, not to the edges of the device. That's just, I think it looks a little bit better. So let's build this one more time to the simulator. And when our app loads, we should get a launch screen. Looks like that. Not the best launch screen. We could probably do something better, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time in this app on the launch screen. So that's going to be our launch screen for this app. And I did notice, and I'll point it out here, that sometimes the launch screen doesn't update immediately in these simulators. And if your launch screen is not updating, firstly, obviously check that you have the accent color and the image name spelled correctly. Secondly, you can try firstly deleting the app on the simulator, and then actually, if I delete this, and then actually closing the simulator completely. And then when you build again to a simulator, it'll open up a new simulator, install a brand new app, and hopefully your launch screen is working. If you want to get crazier with your launch screen, I would recommend in the previous course that I did, the SwiftUI to-do list app, we made a custom launch screen with an actual storyboard. So we didn't just use this plist method here. And using that whole storyboard and developing a full screen, it takes more time, but it's definitely much more customizable. So for bigger apps, I would recommend using that method. But for very simple apps or very simple launch screens at least, you can go ahead and just add it right into the plist, which is awesome. It literally took us just a couple minutes to make this, and our launch screen looks good. It's working, and that's pretty much it for this app. All right, and last and final thing we're going to do is obviously just the Swiffle map app is not a great name for an app for anyone. So we'll just very quickly go to the General tab and we'll change the display name for the app to maybe My Locations. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, you can call it. Let's build it one more time, and hopefully the display name now changes to My Locations. And the display name now, of course, has My Locations, which looks a little bit better. So we are officially done coding. Give yourself a pat on the back. Sit back in your chair and relax. And in the next video, I'm just going to very quickly go over the entire app, all the code that we wrote, kind of go over why we wrote certain pieces of code, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So congratulations, you made it through the course. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, leave a like and a comment on this video. And as always, I'm Nick, this is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.